Welcome in, guys. This is Basch here bringing you this presentation of Basch CFB Network and the Basch Sports Poll, and we are inching closer and closer to the college football playoffs, first inaugural poll of the 2018 season. However, the AP poll doesn't matter to me, only that poll matters, so I will be doing my own polls on Sunday, as I did have this done Saturday, early Sunday morning, like 3 a.m. Eastern, Sunday morning, and I was able to do a video yesterday, but since I really didn't have a live stream video really ready or necessarily going to be throughout this week, I went ahead and I decided to do the Basch Sports Poll Top 25 on today, Monday, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to broadcast any games this week. If any, it'll be a late night Saturday or the 8 o'clock game Thursday between Temple and Tulsa, but I'm not sure how, or Houston, Tulsa. Can't remember who it was. I'm pretty sure it was Temple, Tulsa. Check real quick. Houston, Tulsa. Okay, Houston, Tulsa. So, yeah, that's how that's going to work this week. Just kind of a off week yet again. Haven't really had much. I had weeks, but had issues with audio for some reason. But I seem to have it fixed now, and I had issues early on with audio that I was able to fix in video, but I wasn't quite able to fix it. It was a little bit different issues. But let's go ahead and get started. And I'll explain every single spot, which is something that the doesn't seem to do, why they rank these teams where. So number 25 is going to be Virginia Tech, and the reason Virginia Tech is number 25 is going to be because of the loss against Old Dominion. I think they had a very impressive win against a top 40 quality team in Duke, a very impressive win on the road in a hostile environment, maybe against a team who is struggling quite heavily and not really a good team, but a team that has a lot of talent in Florida State that I can value as a decent win on the road by 21 points. So Virginia Tech holds on to a top barely. Number 24 is going to be the TCU Horned Frogs, and I didn't even consider them a week ago, but their win against Iowa State really made me kind of second-guess this TCU team. They lost to a solid Texas team and a very, very good Ohio State team that they did stick in the game with against Ohio State. So I'm not really worried about TCU now. I think they're going to have a pretty good year. They're beating Iowa State last second like they did. You know, they showed a lot of courage defensively. Offense still has some problems. That has plenty of time to get fixed. John Robinson, though, is not looking good as of late. Number 23 is the NC State Wolfpack, who hasn't gotten a lot of love, and rightfully so, honestly. They haven't played much of anyone. They are 4-0, kind of quietly 4-0, one of the quietest 4-0 teams in the country, if not the quietest. There are a couple group of 5 teams we'll talk about, but a very solid team here, NC State. They're going to get the top 25. They get tested on Saturday against Boston College. It'll be very interesting to see them, but they're quietly 4-0. The reason they're at the spot is because they are 4-0. Number 22 is Colorado. Again, same thing as NC State, except a little more on the, on the radar type, because they did beat UCLA. Even though UCLA isn't good, there is going to be a large focus on UCLA based on the tradition and the location of UCLA football. But Colorado have a big win against Colorado State in week 1, which, for whatever that's worth at this point, we can't really get a good read on what Colorado State is. And they beat New Hampshire. They haven't really played much of anyone yet, so it'll be interesting to see. But Colorado looks very good. The toughest team maybe is Nebraska, but only one win between their opponents, their first 4 opponents, I believe, which is not good. Number 21 is Miami. Miami just kind of quietly winning games. No one's really paying too much attention to the Hurricanes. They won by 37 against a really bad North Carolina team at home. But, however, you can take a look at this Miami team and you could say, hey, their only loss so far is to LSU, and LSU in almost every poll is a top 5, top 6 caliber team. So who knows? I mean, there's interesting things going on with Miami. They really just haven't played much of anyone. They struggled a little bit against Toledo, but Toledo's not too terrible. And they struggled against FIU. That one kind of raises an eyebrow to me, but we'll see. N'Kosi Perry and Malik Rozier's situation is very interesting and is something to keep an eye on. Number 20 is going to be the Michigan State Spartans. Michigan State is here at, I have marked it 2-1. They're 3-1. Correction right there. Oh, man, I did not do good with records, but Michigan State's sitting at 3-1 after another win, kind of easily coasting against Central Michigan. They did get off to a little bit of a slow start, but I mean, for whatever that's worth, slow starts are slow starts. They did beat Utah State, who I'm starting to value a little more. That was Utah State's only loss thus far, is to the Michigan State Spartans, and they look pretty decent out there in Logan, Utah. But Michigan State's loss also to Arizona State I don't find as a bad loss. I find Arizona State to be a rather good team, a top 40 team. Utah State also top 40, in my opinion. A lot of top 40s. But yeah, I think highly, at least top 50 of both those teams. Arizona State's not too bad. Indiana was undefeated going into the game, and they beat them by a couple scores. Central Michigan they beat. So yeah, I got to rank them at this spot above Miami, and that's simply just because their loss is by a walk-off field goal, not by blowout fashion, no matter what the team is, to a quality team on the road versus a neutral site, which you can say whatever you want. You know, in Dallas, it was pretty neutral. It was a little bit in favor of LSU in terms of travel and fans, but it still was pretty decently neutral. Versus a loss on the road, late night kick, got to factor that in there. So Michigan State 20. Number 19, the Texas Longhorns at 4-1. Texas is moving up a little bit in my rankings. I wasn't sure if Texas was going to be able to show that they are legit after a big win against TCU. They did end up winning this weekend, but they got a big test this weekend coming up against the Oklahoma Sooners. We'll get back to that game in a short bit, but their one loss to Maryland first week of the season on the road, essentially, in Landover, basically a road game out there in the Redskins Stadium and FedEx Field, with the rain delay as well when they were up, the rain delay, and they've won 4 games since. Texas looks pretty decent. Texas looks like the Texas of old. Number 18, Iowa. Iowa has not lost to anyone bad. You know, they lost to Wisconsin, where in a game they easily could have won and probably should have won. They looked like a better team in my eyes than Wisconsin, but you can't necessarily rank them ahead of Wisconsin because they don't have those marquee wins. They have Iowa State, which Iowa State has kind of gotten screwed because they had to open up the season with Oklahoma and Iowa. Iowa to start and then Oklahoma instead of giving that little warm-up game against South Dakota State. But it is whatever, and Iowa State did start out 0-2. They did win 1 game since they are 1-3 after having to play TCU as well in the first 4 weeks. They are a 1-3 football team nonetheless, but I do value a little bit or a good bit that win against Iowa State. I also do value their performance against Wisconsin very highly. Iowa looks like a pretty solid team, a top 20 team in my eyes, a sleepy team, a team no one's going to be paying attention to. Maybe you're going to be calling me crazy now to have them 18, but then it will all make sense here in about a month where Iowa is ranked right now. Number 17, Oregon. The Ducks really, they kind of, they look like they were about to let Cal back into the game, but they didn't, and they did a good job keeping Cal away. They definitely live and let learn. You know, they moved on after that Stanford. They blew a lead against Stanford. Arguably, they should be a little higher. But the reason I kept them this low, as a matter of fact, is because they've had the 3-week stretch here where they haven't looked the most impressive. They were able to hold off Cal from coming back, mainly to do with Brendan McElwain turning the ball over. They could not hold against Stanford and struggled against San Jose State. These last 3 weeks is the reason why I got to move Oregon down. And the reason also you could be saying, well, they lost by comeback in Stanford. Yeah, they allowed Stanford to come back in that game. Stanford should not have won that game. And Oregon fumbled the ball and turned the ball over away, but they've been playing sloppy the last 3 weeks. it's time for Oregon to pick it up if they want to rise in my rankings. In my opinion, Oregon is stuck here because of their struggles in the last 3 weeks. The first 2 weeks don't matter at this point. Number 16, Wisconsin. And Wisconsin has a marquee win against Iowa, in my opinion, but they also have a bad loss against BYU, who they're okay. I mean, BYU has lost now to Cal and got blown out against Washington. Cal's out of the top 25, and Washington is a top 5 team, but they got blown out, not even competitive. So the fact that Wisconsin lost that game at home against BYU is a lot worse, really, and than it was a week ago. So Wisconsin can't really be any farther up, in my opinion, but they also can't be that far down, considering they do have that win on the road in Kinnick Stadium against Iowa to kind of fend for them. Number 15, the Stanford Cardinals. Cardinal are sitting here at 15 after a loss against Notre Dame. Not really in blowout fashion, but just kind of not able to stick with Notre Dame. Now, I think that game was played in Palo Alto. They could have walked away with a win. They're not going to fall too bad for that loss. But they mostly fall this many. I think it was 7 spots. They mostly fall this many spots based on teams ahead of them, which is number 14, Kentucky. And again and again and again, Kentucky continues to move along and win some ball games that they have no business winning. You know, you look at their preseason schedule, you mark Florida and you mark South Carolina as L's and Mississippi State as L's, and they've won all 3 of those games. Kentucky is a lot better than we thought. They're 5-0. They are 2 wins away from what I expected them to be, which was 7-5. I expected them to be a good team. I expected them to be able to upset some teams. In fact, I had them upsetting South Carolina, the only team in SEC play to beat South Carolina. But South Carolina is not nearly as good as I thought they were. So Kentucky right now at 14, looking very impressive. Number 13, the Michigan Wolverines. The Wolverines dodge a bullet to a solid Northwestern team, though. I think Northwestern, even with the bad loss to Akron is an undefeated football program. They are solid. They're not a bad team out there at Akron. You know, they are a top 50 caliber team, and that's what you got to look at. But not really even talking necessarily about Northwestern. Their loss coming by a touchdown to Notre Dame, who looks more and more impressive. And taking care of business since then, winning all 4 of these games, except the Northwestern game, the 3 games prior to Northwestern, and the sandwich in between Notre Dame and Northwestern. Those 3 games, blowout fashion, very good, impressive wins. But Michigan struggling on the road against Northwestern. They really just got off to a slow start defensively. Defense was able to look elite in the second half, not allowing a single point by Northwestern in this experienced quarterback in Clayton Thorson. May have to do a little bit with Larkin being out such a short time, not practicing with him, and having John Moten in there, and also using wide receiver Converse, Solomon Volt a little more for Northwestern. But back to Michigan, because we're talking about their ranking, number 13. They're ahead of undefeated Kentucky because they have played more impressive opponents. They have won in a close fashion where they were able to pull it out in the end. They have lost in a close fashion. They haven't gotten blown out, and they've also won in blowout fashion against a couple of decent teams. Nothing great. I mean, Nebraska's pretty garbage. I hate to put that phrase there, but they are a dumpster fire right now. And then SMU, I would say, is the best opponent that they have beaten outside Northwestern. I got to keep Michigan ahead of them just because they look better. They look the part. The defense looks elite. And also their loss is not that bad. And they've played opponents that are tougher than Kentucky's opponents, even though they are solid opponents for Kentucky. Kentucky, in my top 25, spoiler alert, does not have a ranked win. Number 11. Oh, sorry. Did I skip one? Yeah, I skipped UCF. Number 12, UCF. And UCF is 4-0, and man, does it look like they just picked up where they left off. They struggled a little bit against South Carolina State. Not necessarily struggled. They did blow them out with ease, but Mackenzie Milton struggled and turned the ball over a time or two. Can't remember. But dominating Pitt. Not even that. I picked Pitt to win that game, and they dominated. So I take the fall there. UCF takes the high road. They are 4-0. They could be looking at another 12-0 season, 11-0 regular season. Number 11, Auburn Tigers. Their one loss to LSU, and we have not seen one team yet. It's the Washington Huskies, and I've explained this many times. Many times. But you're going to wait to hear it from me a little later with Washington. But here's why Auburn is ranked here. And I'll explain more in depth when we get to Washington why Auburn's ranked there. Auburn just does not look the part lately, especially offensively. Struggle against Southern Miss offensively, struggle against Arkansas offensively, and struggle against LSU offensively. Their offense needs to kick into gear. I'm not counting them out of winning the Iron Bowl, though, because this was what we were saying last year about this Auburn team, was their offense looks terrible, defense looks elite. It will take them a minute to get together. I think they will, though, but I have to see it first to be able to move them up in the rankings. Number 10, Penn State. And Penn State is ranked here because their one loss was arguably they should have won, and I think they actually should have won, but it was at home. Not saying they're a better team than Ohio State. I think Ohio State played so tremendously bad through about 3.5 quarters and just flipped the switch, and then all of a sudden they're right in the game. That just shows more of the character than Ohio State than Penn State. But the Nittany Lions sit here at number 10 because they have an impressive win against Pitt. Well, I think to be an impressive win against Appalachian State now that, does not look good on paper when you see overtime against Appalachian State. But how good Appalachian State's been playing, it might be a very good win for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And all of a sudden we're looking at a team that really just has one loss that isn't bad at all. Is against a top 5 opponent, undoubtedly a top 5 opponent right now. So that's Penn State for you. Number 9, West Virginia. They just continue to win, but not necessarily with ease, though. And that's the thing with West Virginia, is what's keeping them lower, is they're not winning with ease per se. They are struggling to get going. And I'm having trouble with West Virginia right now. It'll be very interesting to see how West Virginia can go moving along. Number 8, in the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Yes, you see it correctly. Notre Dame struggled against Ball State. They struggled against Vanderbilt. I cannot get those 2 games out of my mind when I think Notre Dame, even though they did have impressive wins against Wake Forest, and Stanford, and Michigan. Those 3 wins are very good. But the 2 wins that they struggled in are terrible, and their offense looks a lot better. But, it was me kind of debating on myself, should I buy into Notre Dame? And I said, every time I buy into Notre Dame, every single year, and this really has a factor, and I shouldn't factor this in, but I did. Notre Dame, every time I rank them highly, they let us down, whether it's going to be against Virginia Tech or later in the season. They got 4-game stretch of, I believe it was Northwestern on the road, Syracuse at home at Florida State, and at home against Florida State and at USC. I could see them losing 2 or 3 of those games late and end up as a 10-2, 9-3 team who we're going to look at as overrated, coming back just like we did last year. So that's why. Number 7, Washington. They've just looked the part lately. I mean, they're winning with great fashion. Beating BYU down, beating Utah the way that they did, shutting down defensively, and beating Arizona State the way that they did, holding defensively, and coming as close as they did to winning basically on the road against an Auburn team who's now struggling. Washington at number 7, solid number 7. But the gap between 7 and 6 is very wide, so don't whine. Number 6 is Clemson, and Clemson really just does not look good. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback, whether it's Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence, or Chase Bryce. It does not matter. They do not look that good on the offensive side of the football. Defense looks solid. What they did to Syracuse down the stretch, tremendous job by them. But how you play offensively as well, not able to move the ball. Once you go against a team that can expose your weaknesses, you already got a close call against a Texas A&M team that definitely does not look as good as we thought they were. And you got pushed to the limit against the Syracuse team, who we don't quite know how good they are, but honestly, how can we know if they are good if you've already struggled with a mediocre team this year? Clemson sitting at 6. Perfect spot for me. Number 5, the LSU Tigers have 2 very impressive wins against 2 top 25 opponents. Miami in dominating fashion and Auburn on the road in Jordan-Hare, which is one of the hardest places to play in all of college football. A very tough place. And LSU just went in there. Joe Burrow drove right down the field, scored that touchdown, and LSU looks good. They got a big matchup against Florida. Florida has a possible statement game among the horizon. They didn't make a statement against Mississippi State. Mississippi State made a statement that they are not nearly as good as some of us thought. Number 4 is Oklahoma. They are in that 4th playoff spot if playoffs were to start today, which why would they play 5 games? For crap's sakes. Oklahoma at 4. Very solid, but not really playing anyone. They just looked the part. They look very good. You got Kyler Murray playing really lights out. They have that one game against Army, but you got to factor in time of possession, how many times Oklahoma had the ball, and honestly, you got to also say that their defense is not at the status of the top 3, and it's not at the status of 5 and 6, but their offense is good enough to compensate for that and putting them ahead of 5 and 6. But number 4, Oklahoma, just kind of they have their biggest win right now, in my opinion, is against Iowa State. I like that win in Ames. Ames is a tough place to play. Iowa State's a solid team. I like that win. But they really are going to get tested against Texas this weekend. If we get Oklahoma beating Texas, I think that will be a big statement to say Oklahoma is not going anywhere. But if Texas wins, it might say Texas is actually back. Who knows? Let's see how that game goes. I certainly have my opinions on it. I got Texas winning that one. Number 3 is going to be Georgia, playing the part on defense. And offensively, they need to find a rhythm. They need to stop it with this whole Justin Fields thing, and they need to stick with Fromm, because it's taking off Fromm's, not necessarily confidence, but Fromm's flow, his rhythm. It's knocking that off. So when Fromm is getting in a decent rhythm and throwing the ball pretty decent, you take him out of the ball game, put in Justin Fields. It provides a little spark for a couple plays, and then that spark is eventually gone. You insert Fromm back in the game, and now Fromm's a little worse off, or not as in tune as he was prior to being benched. So Georgia at number 3, they definitely need to figure out that offense before I can move them ahead. And the line between 3 and 2 this time is not that big, because number 2 is Ohio State, who in the face of adversity, they came back against Penn State and TCU. Both of those games they trailed in the second half. TCU only down by 1, but they, stormed back, really won by 12 points. A very impressive showing out in Dallas. And how about this one on the road against Penn State? They were down 13-0 early. Then they storm all the way back and take the lead 14-13. It's crazy. Then Penn State takes over again, 26-14. And then Ohio State storms back again and takes the lead and eventually wins the game 27-26. And the real thing that I noticed with Ohio State is they have elite playmakers. We, of course, know that. They have, but what was shown was a little bit of a different style of Buckeye football, and this was simply, or really Buckeye coaching. It wasn't sticking with what you have done throughout the entire year and doing things that it hasn't worked, because when Penn State was bringing 6-7 guys and play in and play out 70-80% of the time, all that's constantly getting pressure on the quarterback by loading the box and bringing extra guys and not able to hit his man downfield in stride or hit his man over the middle or whatever the case may be, and drops by the receivers. They decide to get playmakers into space to run a lot of screens, whether it was the halfbacks getting involved, including J.K. Dobbins with a receiving touchdown on a screen that started Ohio State in scoring to. Or if you got K.J. Hill, Paris Campbell getting big gains on bubble screens and quick screens, or showing something that we have not seen from Benjamin Victor, getting that ball, going up high, and people keep giving Haskins a little bit of crap. Haskins had guys right in his face. He was avoiding pressure right before he threw the ball, and then when he threw the ball, he threw it to a spot where no one but Ben Victor was going to go up and get the ball, and Ben Victor came down with it, and somehow, some way, the slowest wide receiver on Ohio State's core was able to run the ball into the end zone. From 47 yards, making dudes miss and breaking tackles. That dude is probably hard to bring down, honestly, though. 6'6" guy, he's probably honestly hard. But if you watch that game, you knew Ohio State had elite playmakers. The changes that they made and the adjustments they made at halftime and in the middle, in the heat of the moment, too, in the fourth quarter, the adjustments that they made then, that was elite coaching. So if you look at that, they are comparable to Alabama in that way. And how Ohio State held Penn State when Penn State got across the 50 on the last possession, how Ohio State's defense held Penn State, a top 10 caliber team, at their own place from getting into field goal range when they were on the brink of it, but not quite there. That's when you can tell this is an elite football team. They may lose one game on the road, or not on the road, but one game throughout the rest of the season. But that's an elite team. An elite team will lose, but an elite team will also overcome adversity and make the adjustments needed. That's what they did. And we haven't seen that from our number one team, which is Alabama. And we have not seen them have to make adjustments because why would they? If you're putting up 50, 60 points per game on everyone that you play, but they also have not gone against a really good defense. We saw what Arkansas was able to do, move the ball against Texas A&M on a consistent basis. So what is that Texas A&M game worth at this point? And Alabama putting up about 50 points per game. Definitely, I think they took over that number one spot in points per game. Alabama is undisputed number one team until someone knocks them off. Guaranteed. Teams under consideration. We got Cincinnati here, who's undefeated. USF also playing very good, undefeated. Appalachian State's only loss on the road in Happy Valley against Penn State in overtime. Syracuse one loss against Clemson. They were in consideration last week. They moved down a couple, but not many. And Florida's back up there, and I'm hesitating to put Florida in there mainly because every time I do, they end up losing. They got LSU this weekend to kind of prove themselves. And then Texas Tech, that final spot, they showed a lot of fight against West Virginia. I was very impressed with Texas Tech, even with the loss at home. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe. Also check out my channel. And if you don't have cable or any possible way to watch games, I'll be doing play-by-play broadcasts right here. So make sure you guys tune in for that. I'll see you later.